Politician Tiffany Henyard appears to have lost control of both governments.
Henyard's landlord showed up here to see her tenant in person after she says Henyard has been dodging both her and rent.
Tiffany Henyard's once promising political career has dramatically spiraled downward, leaving the community in turmoil and a legacy marred by scandal and public outrage. Elected in 2021 as the first African-American woman mayor of Dalton, Illinois, Henyard was initially celebrated as a trailblazer and a symbol of hope for a town burdened by long-standing challenges. Her election was heralded as a new chapter for Dalton, with promises of revitalization, community-driven projects, and fiscal responsibility. However, within a few short years, the optimism surrounding Henyard's leadership quickly dissipated as allegations of financial mismanagement, corruption, and lavish personal spending surfaced, leading to a public scandal that has now overshadowed her tenure. The fall from grace of Henyard's administration began when a series of reports surfaced accusing her of misappropriating public funds for personal indulgences. Among the most shocking revelations was an alleged $43,000 Amazon shopping spree conducted in a single day, which was seen as an outrageous misuse of taxpayer money. This was compounded by reports of extravagant spending on luxury hotel stays, first-class flights, and other lavish personal expenditures, including a reported $110,000 stay at the Four Seasons Hotel in Atlanta. These revelations sent shockwaves through Dalton, a town that had once hoped for revitalization and progress under Henyard's leadership. Instead, the community found itself grappling with the reality that the very person who was supposed to lead them out of financial turmoil had exacerbated the crisis with reckless spending. Henyard's tenure was further marred by her refusal to address the mounting allegations and her continued obstruction of efforts to bring transparency to the town's financial management. She vetoed measures designed to enforce stricter financial controls, including proposals to hire independent auditors to investigate her administration's spending. This resistance to oversight only fueled suspicions of corruption and deepened the crisis within Dalton's government. As Henyard continued to block efforts at reform, public frustration grew, with town meetings becoming arenas of confrontation and protests erupting in the streets. What began as a hopeful narrative for Dalton's future quickly devolved into a chaotic and scandal-ridden spectacle. Henyard's behavior during public appearances became increasingly erratic, alienating even her staunchest supporters. At one town meeting, she reportedly arrived with a golden microphone, a gesture that stunned the audience and was seen as a symbol of her disconnect from the gravity of the situation. At another meeting, a DJ allegedly played Rihanna's B*********, Better Have My Money, a move that many interpreted as an attempt to mock the seriousness of the crisis. These bizarre antics only intensified public outrage, reinforcing the perception that Henyard was out of touch with the needs of her constituents. The scandal surrounding Henyard's administration reached a boiling point when suspicions emerged that she was attempting to flee Dalton before facing legal repercussions. Rumors circulated about her possible plan to evade responsibility, and the FBI began to intensify its investigation into her financial activities. As legal scrutiny grew, Henyard's silence on key issues left residents in a state of uncertainty, with many fearing that she might escape the consequences of her actions. Adding fuel to the fire, Henyard's administration became embroiled in further allegations of corruption. The indictment of Deputy Police Chief L.S. Lacey on charges of bankruptcy fraud raised questions about whether Henyard's administration was more deeply entangled in financial misconduct than previously thought. As the investigation expanded, concerns emerged that Henyard's leadership was part of a broader pattern of corruption within Dalton's government, raising suspicions that her rise to power had been fueled not by a genuine desire to serve the public, but by a thirst for personal gain. In response to the growing crisis, Dalton's Board of Trustees began taking urgent steps to curb Henyard's influence. They implemented stricter financial controls, revoked her access to town credit cards, and launched an impartial investigation into her financial dealings. However, these efforts were met with fierce opposition from Henyard, who continued to block any attempts at transparency or external scrutiny of her administration. This resistance created a governance gridlock that further destabilized Dalton's already fragile financial situation. As the town's infrastructure crumbled and financial instability deepened, Dalton's residents were left to watch in frustration as Henyard's defiance and refusal to cooperate with efforts to address the crisis threatened the town's future. Services began to deteriorate, and fears grew that essential public programs and personnel would be at risk if Dalton's financial situation continued to spiral out of control. Tiffany Henyard's political rise and subsequent fall from grace in Dalton serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and political mismanagement. When Henyard was elected in 2021, it seemed like a historic and transformative moment for Dalton, a town long burdened by economic stagnation and political dysfunction. Her victory was particularly inspiring for the Black community, who viewed her as a beacon of hope and change. The promises of revitalization and progress were met with optimism, as many believed that Henyard could lead the town toward a brighter future. However, the trajectory of her leadership soon took a turn for the worse, leaving the town grappling with scandal, mistrust, and uncertainty. In the early days of her administration, Henyard had the support of the town's trustees and local residents, who believed in her vision. However, her refusal to acknowledge the severity of emerging issues, coupled with increasingly bizarre public behavior, gradually eroded her credibility. What initially appeared to be minor missteps soon escalated into a full-blown crisis. Henyard's actions, which included an apparent disregard for public opinion and a series of controversial decisions, alienated not only her political allies, but also the people who had once believed in her. The trust she had worked hard to build quickly deteriorated, and former supporters began to openly express regret for their backing. As Henyard's behavior grew more erratic, the FBI launched a formal investigation into her financial activities, further deepening the public's concerns about corruption and mismanagement. The investigation focused on tracking Henyard's whereabouts and attempting to determine the full scope of any potential misconduct. The probe cast a shadow of uncertainty over Dalton's future, as residents hoped for justice, but remained unsure when or if any legal action would be taken. For many, the investigation served as a faint glimmer of hope that the situation could be rectified, though skepticism and fear of the unknown persisted. Public outcry intensified as the town faced mounting political instability. Former allies distanced themselves from Henyard, and the political landscape became increasingly fractured. The community, once united by the promise of change, now found itself divided and unsure of how to proceed. The lack of clarity regarding Henyard's future compounded the sense of uncertainty, with residents unsure whether she would step down voluntarily or whether legal action would force her hand. At the same time, Dalton's financial situation grew more precarious, further contributing to the atmosphere of chaos and instability. The deeper tragedy of Henyard's fall is that her administration had initially symbolized hope. Her rise to power was heralded as a victory for the town, especially for marginalized communities who had long felt ignored by previous leadership. Henyard's election was seen as an opportunity to address the economic challenges facing Dalton and create a more inclusive, forward-thinking government. Unfortunately, as the years passed, it became evident that Henyard's promises of progress were largely unfulfilled, replaced by a growing list of failures, scandals, and political infighting. What began as a hopeful movement toward revitalization has now become a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in political leadership. Henyard's failure to manage public resources responsibly, her apparent disregard for transparency, and her inability to address the concerns of her constituents led to widespread disillusionment. The public trust that had initially been invested in her was shattered, and the community found itself left with the bitter aftermath of her mismanagement. As Henyard's reputation continued to spiral, the consequences of her actions became more apparent. The financial health of Dalton, once on the cusp of improvement, now teetered on the edge of collapse. The town's residents, who had once rallied behind Henyard's vision, now faced an uncertain future, wondering if they would ever see the promised transformation or if they were destined to live with the fallout from her poor decisions. The damage inflicted on Dalton's political and economic stability would not be easily undone, and it remained unclear how the community could recover from the deep wounds caused by Henyard's leadership. The most tragic irony of Henyard's tenure is that her rise to power was seen as a moment of hope for Dalton, only for that hope to be crushed under the weight of corruption, mismanagement, and political infighting. Henyard's leadership, once viewed as a chance to break free from the town's cycles of stagnation, ultimately became a symbol of how quickly a promising career can unravel when power is abused and public accountability is neglected. Her fall from grace serves as a powerful lesson about the importance of ethical leadership and the need for elected officials to remain accountable to the people they serve. In the end, Henyard's downfall underscores the dangers of unchecked political power and the far-reaching consequences of failing to maintain public trust. The once promising political career that inspired so many has now become a cautionary tale, warning future leaders of the need for humility, transparency, and a constant focus on serving the people. For Dalton, the road to recovery will be long and uncertain, but the lessons learned from Henyard's administration may help inspire the reforms necessary to restore public trust and rebuild the community's faith in its leadership. Whether Dalton can overcome the scars left by Henyard's leadership remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the impact of her political disaster will be felt for years to come.